Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Old Time Rock and Roll. I'm your host, David Tier, where I've been profiling my top 3,000 songs of the rock era from 1954 to 1999, my personal list. Today I'm up to song number 2917, and that one is Puppy Love by Paul Anka. Um, this was a number one hit not, it was number two hit from 1960. Paul Anka was a very, very successful Canadian American singer. He got his start as a teenager. I'll go through his history later. I want to say a little bit first more about this song. He had the original version of the song "Puppy Love." I'm not really crazy about this song, by the way. I think it's kind of a silly teen song, and there's a lot of songs kind of like that from the late '50s. Kind of teenagers complaining about how their parents or their society doesn't understand. They're teenagers in love, and only they can understand the meaning of true love. Their parents can't. Another one of those songs like that. And I think this one's even worse than most of the other ones. But I'm not a big Paul Anka fan, really. I don't know. I think he was kind of overrated. He was a little like Neil Sedaka, I guess, but I think Neil Sedaka was 100 times better. And I mean, Paul Anka. In all fairness, Paul Anka did write his own music like Neil Sedaka, and a lot of people like him. I guess he was a big heartthrob to a lot of girls in the '50s and later in the '70s. He had kind of two phases where he was popular, like Neil Sedaka. He was really popular in the '50s and early '60s as a teenage, I guess a teenage crooner, and then in the '70s he had a comeback as a young man. But anyway, yeah, maybe I should go through his songs. Yeah, I think I'll talk more about the song "Puppy Love" later. I want to go through Paul Anka's. Yeah, maybe I should mention. I'm just gonna do these slides in order. Donnie Osmond had a remake, as if Paul Anka's version wasn't bad enough. Donnie Osmond had to remake it in 1972, and his version is one of my least favorite songs of all time. I made a list about a year ago of what I consider my 20 least favorite songs of the rock era. I think this was number five, and the number six was another one by Donny Osmond. Go Away, Little Girl. Both of those songs were bad enough when they were first recorded in the early '60s. I don't know why Donny Osmond had to remake both of them. And he did both versions worse, as if the first versions weren't bad enough. I mean, Puppy Love by Paul Anka did just barely make my list. The other one, Go Away, Little Girl, the original version was by Steve Lawrence. That one didn't make my list. And neither of these songs by Donny Osmond made my list. I mean, Donny Osmond just. I do have one solo hit by Donny Osmond on my list. I'm a little ashamed of it. Sweet and Innocent actually did make my list barely. You'll hear that pretty soon. And I think three songs by the Osmonds. I think the Osmonds were better as a group. But I was never crazy about the Osmonds. Anyway, that's enough of the Osmonds. That's enough of Donnie. Get out of there, Donnie. Okay, so anyway, yeah, and I think I should also mention that the song that Puppy Love was meant to, Paul Anka wrote it. He wrote it for this woman here. I guess she was just a girl at the time. That's Annette Funicello. I'm sure most of you are familiar of her. She was one of the original Mouseketeers. 1955, I think at age 13, Disney hired her to be a Mouseketeer. She started out with $160 a week, which was a lot of money for a young teenager back in the '50s. I mean, she kind of lived it up. She became very famous, mostly for Disney movies early on. She was in several Disney movies in the late '50s. I don't want to go too much into her. She had some of her own hits later. I'm not a huge Annette fan either. I guess a lot of guys liked her because of her huge boobs, and she was a kind of a teenage girl heartthrob. But I've never been a big fan of Annette Funicello. She was also in all the beach party movies. Some of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life were some of the beach party movies with Frankie Avalon. And anyway, that's enough of Annette. But anyway, so getting back to Paul Anka, here's what he looked like when he was young, when he was a teenager, and I'll just go through his hits. So in 1957, he had probably his most well-known hit song, Diana. That one did come up really high on my list. I'm not going to tell exactly how high, but most people consider that one of the great early rock songs of all time. And it is, he wrote it when he was just 16 years old. And I think it was about a real, I think it was his babysitter. I'm not sure, but there was an older woman he had a crush on at age 16, and he wrote that song about her. That was his first big hit, Diana. It starts with a line, "I'm so young and you're so old. This, my darling, I've been told." A lot of people think that's one of the greatest lines in any rock song. And then he followed it up with several other big hits. My Destiny in 58. I'm just going to go through his top tens. 59, he had Lonely Boy. That was another one, number one. And he also had Put Your Head on My Shoulder, which went to number two. He followed that next year, 1960, with the one I'm featuring today, Puppy Love. That also went to number two. His version did. In case you're interested, Donnie Osmond's version went to number three in 1972. Hard to believe, but anyway, what else did he have? He had a song called "My Hometown." I don't think it was the same as Bruce Springsteen's "My Hometown." By the way, I'd be very, very surprised if it is. I'm not familiar with that song, but and then he didn't hit for a long time. Like I said, he had to come back in the '70s. This is what he looked like in the mid '70s. In '74, he had a third number one called "You're Having My Baby," another song I really don't like. It did make my list though. I don't know why, but I put it in my list. It was a big hit, and even though I'm not crazy about it, it was a big hit. I think a lot of women were crazy about it. I don't think too many men were crazy about it. He also had a One Man Woman, One Woman Man. I'm not even familiar with that song. And then in '75, his last big hit was Times of Your Life. That's another song I really can't stand. That one actually is another song that made my top 20 worst list. Uh, so I'm not, like I said, I'm not a fan of Paul Anka. I mean, he was a big star for whatever reason, probably because he was a big teen heartthrob, but just not one of my favorites. Anyway, I guess that's my profile on Puppy Love by Paul Anka. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.